I hear the beating of a troubled heart, crying out for relief as it suffers through the loss of love and betrayal. We are in a place of dark love and black hearts that is far from the healing heartbeat of the internet. I'm Don Jackson. We live in a very stressful age. At times, it seems that our world is crumbling all around us, and we have no other choice but to hide ourselves away in a dark place. We have just lived through one of the most difficult economies in recent history. Countries are on the verge of bankruptcy, their populace teetering on the edge, waiting for some kind of a miracle that will lead them away from the brink. What they see, however, is the outsourcing of their jobs to foreign lands. Governments are scrambling, promising light at the end of a dark tunnel, when all they can really do is ride the wave and hope for the best. Take a look up and down your street. Talk to your neighbors, relatives, and friends. There are very few of us who haven't been touched by this global crisis. It's caused many a sleepless night. We suffer anxiety over a job loss or the threat of one that hangs just above our heads. We hope our employers can keep their heads above water so that we can feed our families and provide them with shelter from this global storm. It's been a time of bank foreclosures on family homes, a personal debt load with maxed out credit cards that is frightening to most. One of the most familiar commercials on TV and radio right now is for debt restructuring. The pressure to keep one step ahead has caused so much stress that it affects our relationships and our families. We argue, we fight. Our sleep is filled with dark dreams. We make rash decisions to help ease the strain. And that's when some wander into a dark place where hearts can grow black. A place that is far from the healing heartbeat of the internet. Do you remember those poignant lines in The Bridges of Madison County by Robert James Waller, published by Warner Books? These lines continue to move me no matter how many times I reread it. In a letter to Francesca, Robert Kincaid, the National Geographic photographer, writes, and I quote, "I once watched a Canada goose whose mate had been shot by hunters. They mate for life, you know. The gander circled the pond for days and more days after that. When I last saw him, he was swimming alone through the wild rice, still looking." Unquote. Kino Tsurayuki, a poem from 100 Poems from the Japanese, translated by Kenneth Rexroth, the book published in 1955 by New Directions Publishing. This poem so reminds me of what Robert James Waller saw, but only 1,000 years earlier. He remembers. Out in the marsh reeds, a bird cries out in sorrow, as though it recalled something better forgotten. I'm Don Jackson, trying to relieve the hold that a black heart has over those who have become bitter by love. In our time machine of the mind, we cross the millennia to the 9th century and the words of one of the leading writers of the day. Incidentally, most of those leading writers of the time period were women in the part of the world where this writer was familiar with the cruelty of a black heart. Even though these poems were written so long ago, they could easily describe a broken heart today. The words of Ono no Kamachi, translated by Kenneth Rexroth, and Ikuku Atsumi, from the collection World Poetry, an anthology of verse from antiquity to our time, published by the Quality Paperback Book Club. Komachi wrote, "Doesn't he realize that I am not like the swaying kelp in the surf, where the seaweed gatherer can come as often as he wants? Unquote. Heartache is no stranger through the centuries. It's a familiar face in the dark." Again she writes, "So lonely am I. My body is a floating weed severed at the roots. Were there water to entice me, I would follow it, I think." Thinking about him, I slept, only to have him appear before me. Had I known it was a dream, I should never have wakened. The words of Ono no Komachi from Anthology of Japanese Literature, translated by Donald Keene, published in 1955 by Grove Press, Incorporated. I'm Don Jackson. Again from the 9th century, the words of Ono no Komachi, this time translated by Helen Craig McCullough. And I quote, "Autumn nights, it seems, are long by repute alone. Scarcely had we met when morning's first light appeared, leaving everything unsaid." Unquote. A dark place in the heart echoes with tears and rain. Again she writes, "The flowers withered, their color faded away, while meaninglessly I spend my days in the world, and the long rains were falling." We are listening closely to the heartbeat of the internet because it reveals some truths that have been hidden away, covered by the scars that are still tender. Han Wu-Ti, many centuries ago, wrote, "The sound of her silk skirt has stopped. On the marble pavement, dust grows. Her empty room is cold and still. Fallen leaves are piled against the door. Longing for that lovely lady, how can I bring my aching heart to rest?" I'm Don Jackson. I have always been a fan of Stephen King. Of course, he is known for his tales of horror, of dark hearts running rampant. But in each one of those stories, there is always a counterbalance to the evil in his make-believe world. He always shows us a faint glimmer of light to dispel the darkness. In his Dark Tower series, he writes about a gunslinger in a parallel world and his group of companions who are all on a quest. Those companions have stepped through doorways from our world into this slightly altered reality. One of his companions on this journey is a young boy who finds a rose in a vacant New York City lot. He reaches out to touch it, but finds there may be menace behind its facade of beauty. Even so, he feels the need to protect the rose. It is an image that resurfaces many times throughout the book in the series. It is an image that resurfaces many times throughout the books in the series. When we think of a rose growing in such an inhospitable place like a fenced-in lot that houses the remains of a demolished building, we wonder what could cause such beauty in the midst of so much devastation and destruction. How could it survive? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, M.D., from the book The Wheel of Life, published by Scribner, said, and I quote, "I have never met a person whose greatest need was anything other than real, unconditional love. You can find it in a simple act of kindness towards someone who needs help. There is no mistaking love. You feel it in your heart. It is the common fiber of life, the flame that heats our soul, supplies passion to our lives, and energizes our spirit. It is our connection to God and to each other." Unquote. I hear the beating of a troubled heart, crying out for relief as it suffers through the loss of love and betrayal. We are in a place of dark love and black hearts that is far from the healing heartbeat of the internet. I'm Don Jackson.